this laser point. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy to have this ICANX talks. Actually, tonight is a special event because this ICANX is going to the 114 times, this week. And today is the evening, one day behind our Teachers' Day. So teachers and our big celebration for the big moon, the full moon. This festival. So this like a double festival celebration and this evening. So, but today we are so happy is because we have this great event, of September. Actually, this was the second week of September. This was the second week where we have this on-site, audience here. So last week we have Zhonglin. This week we will have Nicholas Peppas, and later we will next week we will have two young scientists. Then we will have Anne from Australia. Then we will have Brad Nielsen was from Switzerland. So this month was quite busy, but this month is a big month on ICANX Talks. So tonight, I'm really, really excited because tonight we have a big group to celebrate this special event for teachers and also for this big reunion. Tonight we have Professor Nicholas Peppas was from University of Texas and Austin, and we have Peng, Xi Peng, and me was on site this place. We have Hong Gang was online. We have Maria was online. We have Bingbing was online. So tonight will be the first time we have this hybrid online and offline, lectures. Firstly, let me give a brief introduction of Professor Nicholas Peppas. Actually, it's really, really hard to, say how great it is, Professor Nicholas Peppas. Actually, he was graduated from MIT in the 1970s, and then he was done so many outstanding works. He became the world's top, scientist in the biomaterials, and his citation was more than 175,000. The H index is 194. So the top one, in this area. And another great thing is, I think, no one can compete with Professor Nicholas Peppas. Is that he had nursed about more than 1,000, students, including 120 PhD from his group, another 350, visiting scholars, graduate students in his lab, and more than that, he have 750, ender was trained in his lab. Many of them became, the famous scientists and also the entrepreneurship in this world and become a big family. So Professor Peppas is one of the best teachers in this, in this world. So tonight we are so great to have, so lucky to have Professor Nicholas Peppas to celebrate this special event. So let's give him a warm welcome, Professor Peppas. Now, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alice. I will not connect with the slides yet. I would like to welcome, I do not want to use the slides yet. I would like to welcome everybody. This is a great occasion, and I would like to thank Professor Alice Zhang for having put together this incredible series of lectures. I have learned a lot. As you know, many of those lectures are now available in the Western world in YouTube and in other countries, in other media. And it is a way to educate the younger and the old generation. I'm particularly happy today to have with me this wonderful auditorium that has been built. You will see it a little bit later during the question and answer. And there are about 20 people there, but I'm especially thankful to my colleagues that with the help of Professor Zhang, I have invited here Professor Honggang Cui from Johns Hopkins University, who has been a friend for many years, and he has been also my host in China on various occasions. More recently, as I was saying, going to Westlake in Southeast China and having magnificent time, but also great talks. I like to thank also Dr. Bingbing Wang, who was with Professor Langer at MIT. He is presently today at Cambridge. And I would like to welcome especially my compatriot, Professor Maria Hadjinicolaidou. For those of you who are wondering how that's pronounced, it's Hadjinicolaidou, and you will see in a few minutes why we have invited her today. She's connecting with us right now from her office. She just entered her office. And I want to say that this forum, this ICANX, it's a magnificent idea. Think about it. It brings so many time zones together. Right now in Beijing, it is 8:10 in the evening. And in Austin, Texas, it's 7:10 in the morning, the same day, Friday. And in Los Angeles, it's 5:10. And I know we have about 30,000 people attending right now, which of course makes it a little bit, make me a little bit nervous. But what I wanted to say about that is that we have people today connected from Europe, from Africa, from Western Africa, from South America, from the United States, Canada. So really, it's a global forum. So thank you again. And without further ado, I would like to show you my slides. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, but at the same time, I would like to show you really a little bit about our thinking. Because one of the purposes of this particular meeting, discussion, is to have a discussion with the others and to teach the young generation that the world is changing, that the world does not have barriers, that we are all working for one and only one problem: to help the patients, at least in my field, to help the citizens in other fields, like the field of John Lee, yes, last week, who is a magnificent scientist from Georgia Tech. So today I will concentrate a little bit more on the medical aspects. And I will talk about this general field that has gotten so many names these days: tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. And what are the differences? And what are the similarities? And where are we going? And this is a very important field. Coming from the biomaterials area, I'm going to talk about smart hydrogels. And I will show you how smart hydrogels can really make a difference in the next generation of systems. Now, the reason I have with me here my dear colleagues is because Hong Gang has done a lot of work in the field of biomaterials and drug delivery. In fact, he is the associate editor, if I'm correct, of the Journal of Control Release. So a major figure. And Bingbing comes from a wonderful laboratory at MIT, which for the last 50 years has really built a variety of systems to treat patients, thousands of patents. And I wanted Maria Hadjinicolaidou to be with us today, representing Greece, actually the little island of Crete, Crete, as we say in Greek. She is in the city of Heraklion, and I know many Chinese have been in Crete, and they know Crete. That's where the Minoan civilization was, exactly in Heraklion. I want her to be here today because she just returned from the European Society for Biomaterials meeting, where there was a debate. And what do you think was the subject of the debate? That in 10 years, we are going to be able to print new organs with cells and everything in it. And guess what? She took the side against. So she was one of the two. The other was Abhay Pandit, that we presented the side, no, it's not going to be in 10 years. This was a wonderful meeting, 1,200 people. So it's very appropriate that I have selected this subject. And without putting Maria in the middle, I wanted her at the end to say one or two things, closing what she thinks about it. But let me go to some of my specifics. We cannot do anything as scientists, as educators, without being good educators. Tomorrow is Teacher's Day in China. And I have some thoughts about how we teach engineering and science, especially in a changing world and in a world that is inclusive, that includes all of us. There are no barriers anymore. You cannot say, oh, we are not going to use you because you are too young, a woman. What difference does it make? If this young woman has an incredible contribution to the field, we listen. We listen even there is no contribution because we want to make the new generation to be as good as we are. I will start with some basic things because there are some of you that are maybe young students and you don't know it. These are studies from the United States, but in the United States, we still have a problem with transplants. There are still many patients that will die because we don't come on time with transplants. And the transplants can be the simplest possible transplants or a very difficult transplants. In fact, it's important for you to know that the word transplant in a different way is what made me become a biomedical engineer. In 1967, yes, 55 years ago, I was a sophomore, second year, at the National Technical University of Athens. And one evening, Saturday evening, I returned home and I'm listening to the news on radio. There was no television in my house. And I heard that Christian Barnard had done the first heart transplant. And I was mesmerized. I was not a medical doctor. I had not studied anything about medicine except what we heard in high school in biology and so on. And here I was realizing that there are people who cut hearts, put them aside, take another heart from somebody else and put it in. So this transplantation is really what made me a biomedical engineer. And I came to the United States in 1971, 51 years ago, the same year with Bob Langer, the same year with Mike Sefton. Yes, we were classmates. Yes, we were playing ping pong in the basement of the building, chemical engineering building. And I have to say that Bob Langer was beating even the Chinese graduate students in ping pong, and the rest is history. So this transplantation has led to the development of all these tissue engineering problems, and now the most general area of regenerative medicine, of tissue regeneration. And many of you know it, have been working on it in bones and tendons and muscles and so on. For me, my first experience was 50 years ago, in February of 1972, when Professor Yanis Yanas in the mechanical engineering department at MIT called me his office. I took his course on viscoelasticity, and I started following what he was doing. And he was working with Professor Burke at Harvard, developing a skin that could replace burned skin. It was not by tissue engineering yet, but he had these ideas that something like this had to be done. And here, 50 years later, where are we? We have a market which is $330 billion. We have an expected increase. If you go to the major biomaterials, biomedical, bioengineering meetings, you will see that everybody is talking about cells and cell growth and cell proliferation and cell interactions with polymers, with metals, with ceramics. That is our field. And we do it for one and only one reason. We want to improve the quality of life of our patient. But to do that, we realize the polymer is still an aspect that we don't know 100% well. We all talk about scaffolds, gels, sheets. I'm pretty sure you've heard the technology of Professor Teruo Okano, the sheet engineering that came out of Japan, and it's now practiced mostly in the United States. And we need to have systems that will produce the particular construct, will produce the particular organ repetitively, continuously, and the same all the time. This is a wonderful little paper we published about 5 years ago with my colleagues in Portugal. I have a tremendous interaction with Portugal. And you can see here, Monica Neves was a graduate student, Professor Wexler from the University of Texas, San Antonio, Manuela Gomez from the University of Minho, Professor Rice, who this week got a major award, Professor Granja, who is at the University of Porto, and myself. And what we were trying to show is you can develop new techniques to come up with better scaffolds, better surfaces that are intelligent, that are smart. Smartness means what? They recognize what is next to them and they respond to the surrounding fluid. And most of you will say, but that's impossible. And I remind you, what about pH sensitivity? And you say, well, pH sensitivity is only one approach. And then I say, what about temperature sensitivity? What Teruo Kano does, he changes the temperature, he is able to remove the sheath from the cornea. And you say, well, that's something. What if I show you that there are systems that can recognize small molecules, proteins, they can recognize morphogenic proteins and so on, and they can start releasing the way you want to release. But at this point, I'd like also to point out something else, which is very important, which is that I happen to have 3 computers next to me, and they show me the time. So I know how much I'm speaking, but I love speaking about these ideas. And I hope you will not mind too much that I'm not giving you only data. And there comes this new generation, newer generation, like Maria, like Hong Kong, and so on, and Bin Bin, of course, who say, we can 3D print those systems. You can 3D print them? You can take a polymer, mix it with cells, and print it. And there are so many people now, you go to meetings, half of the papers are on 3D printing. And we did this, and we did that, and we did that. And I'm always sitting back, and I must admit, I'm a little bit older than the others, although still active. And I'm smiling, and I'm saying, yes, did they check the unreacted monomer? Did they check if the system breaks down after 10 minutes? And so on. And very often I ask, no, sometimes I ask, very often I don't ask. I shut up, and then I go to the leaders like Bob Langer and Tony Mikos and Kato Lorenzen, and I say, what's happening here? And of course, I go to the companies because more and more companies are using 3D printing. So there are many, many, many problems. And please work in those areas. They are very important areas. I don't know what the result of the debate yesterday in Bordeaux, France was. I don't know if Maria won or the other side won. I know that Joachim Kohn was directing the whole thing, but I can say one thing. Whether you won or not won, the important thing is we all work to improve the quality of our patients. There are many papers you can read. I would like to highly recommend that you read this. Yes, I'm partial. I'm the editor of this journal, along with Professor Jank from Sichuan University. And this is a paper we published about 5.5 years ago, The Challenge to Improve the Response of Biomaterials to the Physiological Environment. Look at these words. They're very carefully selected. It's a challenge. You don't just take a polymer, mix it with the cells, and think that that's going to give you an answer. You don't even check just the toxicity. There's much more you have to do. And of course, everything goes back to precision surgery. My interaction in the last 10 years, it was in May of 2011, believe it or not, that I first came to China. I came to Chengdu. I was president of the International Union, and we were preparing the famous 2012 World Congress of Biomaterials, which took place in Chengdu with great success. And since then, I met quite a few people, and with some of them, I became friends, and I kept relations. Some of them are older than me, but one that really changed me was Professor Fu, Fu of PLA Hospital and PLA University, with whom actually we wrote a book that appeared a year and a half ago after a long delay, but it appeared, and it does address some of the same questions in tissue engineering. The other thing is the use of hydrogel. All of you who know me, you know that I adore hydrogels. It is so funny that 51 years ago, when I and a few others started at MIT working on hydrogels, people were not believing us. What is this material? This is not science. This is not scholarly work. What are you doing with them? Do you know anything? We were developing them for artificial hearts. We wanted them to be non-thrombogenic services. We had no idea. Bob Langer, Mike Sefton, especially Mike and I, we had no idea that they would become so popular. And now you open a journal like Science or Nature, and you see in it 1/3 of the papers, they start with, and these hydrogels can be used. So it is very interesting how things have changed. This is a wonderful paper from Advanced Materials. It's almost 10 years old, but I want to mention it because it has in it three great friends. One is Nassim Anabi, who is professor at UCLA. The other is Professor Ali Tamayol, who is professor at the University of Connecticut. And of course, the magnificent Ali Kadem Hosseini, who is now the CEO of the company Terasaki, where they do incredible things. Yes, hydrogels can be used for scaffolds, for advanced types of scaffolds. And when people like me say, and what about the unreacted monomers? We have found ways to eliminate that, to come up with conditions that we can have 100% preparation of the final material. So now suddenly you realize, and this is a slide I borrowed from Tony Mikos, you recognize that we have several things we can do to a matrix and we can do to a cell in order to bring them in contact together. This idea started in 1985, at least in the United States. I apologize that I don't know very well the Chinese history on this subject. But in 1985, Professor Fong, who at that time, I think he was already at UC San Diego, was the one who used the word tissue engineering. And I recall a telephone call from Bob Langer in January or February of 1986. That's only 35 years ago, saying, what do you work on, Bob, these days? Oh, I work on tissue engineering. What is that? I didn't know what tissue engineering was. And it took some time for him to explain to me that the National Science Foundation of the United States had put together this program. And the result is history. He got that grant that year. He was the first one. And then in 88, Mikos, who had done his PhD with me, went with Langer and many others. Gordana Vuniak-Novakovic. I don't know if you know, but Gordana and Lisa Fried started at MIT as postdocs of Bob Langer and many, many others in the field. So it was an excitement. And we have photos from last times. And it was just incredible to see all this young generation working. And that's one of my messages at the very end of this talk. Please don't stop this generation. Please continue supporting them. Don't say, you're too young. You are from a minority group. You don't know anything. Only we know those things. That's not true. I mean, on a totally different level, I always say to the Western world that we Europeans, we didn't know that there was a Marco Polo. And if we were very negative about Marco Polo, a lot of things would have been lost. So let's open the doors. Let's not close the doors on anything and anybody. I think this slide shows you my summary of what I think is very, very important in the field. It's a very complex field. It is not simply a polymer, a biomaterial. Some of the faculty colleagues think that, oh, I know molecular biology, therefore I know everything. Yes, you know some things. You're not familiar with the toxicity of the active agents. You're not familiar with diffusion. You're not familiar with processes. So what I'm saying is we all work together. And that is called convergence. And I used to know the word in Chinese, but I've forgotten it. It's a word that was coined about 15 years ago by Professor Phil Sharp of MIT, Nobel laureate, who said, big problems like this is a big problem cannot be solved by just having a few chemists or a few biologists solve it. Cancer is not an easy solution. It requires large groups. At the University of Texas, we have a group of maybe 50 people working on different aspects of cancer. In your universities, you have the same way. This is the technique that created, in my case, the intelligence that I'm talking about. And when I talk intelligence, please, there will be a few of you that will naturally say, oh, he does it so he can get money from the funding organizations. That's not true. We do it because we believe there is a certain different approach. And by the way, all of us, and I include many other people you know, sometimes we will come up with a totally new idea, but sometimes we will borrow from another field. This is the famous idea of the molecular imprinting. The idea is very simple. I will take a molecule or molecules that I want to be able to set permanently in a gel or in the cavities of the gel or in the pores of the gel. And I will take it, and under certain conditions, I will mix it with functional monomers and sometimes cross-linking agents. And I would do a fast reaction, as I do, usually in the absence of oxygen. Why in the absence of oxygen? Because as a material scientist, I know that the polymer has to be the purest possible. And it has to be reproducible. It cannot be, because if I do that reaction at room temperature in nitrogen, in oxygen and so on, I get peroxidic bonds and I start degrading this system. And so the scaffold is not what I originally thought. So I create these cavities, and these cavities hand in them the template, and then I take the template and I remove it. And what is left behind are the functional groups that are characteristic to recognize, hopefully, that cavity and only that template, and only that template. Here, the idea is very well clarified, and there are a lot of things that perhaps you can read. I know you will have the slides because you will have the whole talk from this paper, one of many that Rui and Pedro and Manuela and myself. Manuela, by the way, was a PhD student of Tony Miko. So you can see everybody's connected. And Marisa was a PhD student of mine. And Neves was a PhD student of Pedro Grange. There is a tremendous interaction, and there are never barriers. I do not want anybody who listens today to say, oh yeah, if they are your friends, they are included. If they are not your friends, they are not. That is not true. The field is very open. Myself, I'm pretty sure you've spoken with Langer, you've spoken with Mikos, with Cato Lorenzin, with many of the dear colleagues in China who are leaders. They open the doors and they talk to you. They talk to you and they bring you in. There's always a limit. Every day I get about 50 applications of people who want to work with me because I'm very active in LinkedIn. So I have something like 100,000 people who follow me. Can I come and work with you? And it is very difficult to say, no, I don't have any money. And I'm one human being. And I'm a little bit older than the rest of you. And I have some other interests. But anyhow, coming back, this was the idea. Why am I saying this idea? 25, 27 years ago, I was in a library on a Friday evening, one of the libraries of Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. Those of you who are in China or who are listening right now from Tenerife in the Canary Islands, say, where is that place? And I was alone. There was nobody else. And I started reading and I fell upon a paper in catalysis, and I read it. And it was by a European scientist by the name of Klaus Mosbach, if you speak German. And Klaus was saying in it that he could create new types of chromatographic columns that had affinity for certain types of molecules. That was it. I said, we can do that for our field. And I started working. Actually, my first PhD on the subject was a magnificent student. Her name is Ebru Oral, and she's an associate professor at Harvard, tenured associate professor at Harvard. And with her, we published the first work on the subject. The idea of molecular recognition is very simple. So I can go and I can create an antigen-antibody system or a cell receptor system, and I can do that. And when you start thinking of that, you think, oh, that's a recognition. It's like we do with enzymes, like we do with nucleic acids. Absolutely right. And in fact, if you go to the early literature, you're going to find that the very first person who recognized that recognition was Emil Fischer in 1914 in Germany. He was the first one who said, I can take enzymes and I can use them to recognize something happening. The mechanism is very simple, and it is a mechanism where you have macromolecule and a ligand forming a microligand. And the thing is this, that is the natural recognition. So you see these results, and please read this magnificent 20-year-old paper by Zach Hilt and Mark Byrne. They are both former PhDs of mine. They wrote this paper while they were doing their PhDs. I wanted them, it was their idea. I wanted it to be their idea. And they wrote it alone. And they are both distinguished professors now. One is at Kentucky and the other is at Rowan University. And both of them members of the National Academy of Inventors and so on. The idea is the idea of binding, but in recognition, there is one additional characteristic. You can have a surface that recognizes, you can be passing 5 angstrom away, and you can be recognized. These are all the students. You see Ebru Oral, who is professor at Harvard, Mark Byrne, who is professor at Rowan, Zach Hill, Kelly Keys is now big director at Eli Lilly. Gianfranco Spizziri is in the southern part of Italy. He's professor at Calabria, University of Calabria, in Arcavacata di Rente. Shahana Kursidas, NIH, and so on, down to the latest ones. Of course, Marisa, that's Marisa Wexler, is professor at San Antonio, and John Craig is professor at Oklahoma. And these are some of the patents to show you that, yes, this is one area where we have actively worked with patents coming up with companies, and we have a total of about, and we have started some companies actually in that area. That's the idea again. I think I mentioned it already. Basically, the template, reacting polymerization. This is the important part, ladies and gentlemen. This is the important part in the new intelligent scaffold, that there are nanocavities formed and that those nanocavities can now recognize something happening in the surrounding environment. For example, a bone morphogenic protein or something like that. Or sometimes they can partially include in the cavity certain nutrients or proteins that are recognized. So the system is active. The system is not a passive polymer. It recognizes what happens around. And many of you will ask why. Because thermodynamically it is active. Go back to your basic thermal. You hear about entropy, enthalpy, free energy, and so on. And you hear that there are changes, and you know that the change of the free energy is going to tell you if a process goes spontaneously to equilibrium or not. Well, here is the serious answer. In this case, you recognize something that can fit in this cavity, and that gives a process. Now, be careful. That recognition is not simply a topological recognition. Oh, this is small enough, so it will get in there. No, 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 no. It has retained the specific chemical compounds, that had been formed at the beginning. So hopefully, if everything goes fine, it will be able to keep that information and recognize just that particular compound and nothing else. And as you will see in a few minutes, even two compounds. This is a wonderful little paper in case you haven't seen it. And we play with the worlds. This is Heidi Calver, who is now at the University of Colorado and in a small startup company, protein imprinted polymers, the shape of things to come. It's like a science fiction paper. Is that really the things that we should be expecting? Yeah. Very simply, because when you develop such systems and when you say, I have new intelligent hydrogels, you have to show some good results. And the results in this case are with polyacrylic acid-based material, but be careful. It is prepared in dimethyl sulfoxide. And there are reasons for that, but I'm not going to get into all these things. They have to do with the conformation of the material. And it's polyethylene glycol dimethacrylate is the material that is cross-linking it, and there is a special reaction. And look at the cross-linking ratio, 67%. So you form three-dimensional structures that are very well controlled. And this is the simplest possible case in which we can recognize, believe it or not, glucose. It's fluorescent here. And we don't recognize galactose, which is the foreign enantiomer. So these are some of the successes. Not everything works very well. So this is the paper that I was talking about that perhaps you can read in tissue engineering. But this is now the process as it translates to scaffolds. And here come the serious problems. How do you do that process in the laboratory? That's well established. We all know it. Not only these three big groups know it, but many other people. The question, how do you do it fast? How do you come up to 100% completion? How do you do it without destroying the cells? In the case where you want this network to be intelligent and to interact with the surrounding environment, what will happen if you have a high ionic strength? Will suddenly the presence of, say, chlorine or sodium and so on make a difference? Of course it will. So there are really many unanswered questions. Here I show you some results so that you can show the power of this intelligent technique in relation to scaffolds. This is a situation of a molecularly imprinted scaffold versus a non-imprinted scaffold. Notice in all cases, the molecularly imprinted is on top. Therefore, it can recognize the specific compound. Here it's trypsin, but it doesn't have to be trypsin. You will see other compounds in general. So we start recognizing that depending on how we make the system, we can recognize different compounds. And you can imagine what happened immediately in my discussions with my students. Let's try to recognize proteins. Let's try to recognize antibodies. Let's try to recognize difficult systems. Can we come with a system that we can put next to a fractured bone at once? Once, not at once, once. And it will start recognizing these various nutrients and so on, and regrowing and growing the new bone in situ, not externally obtained, okay? But to do that, and this is not going to be a big discussion because we don't really have time, I had to have people that will tell me which materials to use. What do you do? It's a vast knowledge of polymers and monomers and this and that, and toxic and non-toxic. So I went to a colleague of mine at UT by the name of Peng Yu Ren. Yes, originally Chinese. And I said, can we come up with a simple screening method of large sets of ligands? So we can say, this protein will be recognized by that. And he said, of course we can do it. We can determine the favorable binding sites and the favorable energy. And so he started doing the computational studies, and we worked with him as well. And you can see one example. This is one of the earliest papers, but it is a nice paper. You can see how molecular docking simulations can be used to come up with new structures. And you can see now you have a molecule that will recognize that particular structure that you're trying to recognize. Why is that important? It's important because now you can start putting in a certain order different monomers that you might have considered using to come up with these intelligent scaffolds. And here they are, and the higher the score, the better the material is. And I can tell you, we used to work with methacrylic acid and with alginates, and now we are working much more on this category over here, simply because we know that there are better interactions with the system. No, there are some systems like with the vinyl benzoic acid that are very difficult to react, but at least we know that we have the beginning of a good interaction. And this I showed to you to show you how we are able to rapidly screen peptide ligands for various protein recognitions, and how we are able to come up with certain structures that we like and others that we can never use. Also, this technique is very important for another reason. Here is the case of recognition of glucose for the treatment of diabetes. And we wanted to find conditions under which we could recognize it. And you can see we are able to come up with a structure which is polymethacrylic acid based that has the ability to interact and to shape the material so that it can recognize that particular glucose. Now, how about proteins? This has always been a question in my mind, because eventually I wanted to go to true biomedical applications, not just drug delivery. And we started working first with cytochrome C. And we started doing all kinds of molecular imprinting. And you can see here that we have highly molecularly imprinted structures versus blue one. Some people look at this data and say, oh, he didn't recognize that much. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the ratio of the two. You have almost about 80% better recognition. That's a huge result. These are particles non-imprinted and imprinted of diethyl aminoethyl methacrylate, copolymerized with acrylamide and copolymerized with methacrylic acid. And with 5% of hydrophobic agents in it. You have to go and see the paper, but we show you that we are able to design these types of systems. Okay, so at this point, which was about 5 years ago, I said, it's time for us to apply all these things now to a real tissue regeneration system. We looked at different possibilities. We talked to Tony Mikos, who is only an hour away from here, and who is my former PhD. He was very, very helpful. But at the same time, we found an incredible scientist in the Netherlands called Amir Zadpour. And we started working with him. And I think you've read some of the great successes on how we can come up now with systems that will preferentially release growth factors in response to certain parameters or certain inputs that they will get from the surrounding environment. Why growth factors? Because they have been used already. Jeff, for example, they have been used in a variety of techniques. When we started doing the work that I'm about to show you, we started with something very simple. And that very simple was a simple structure of a bovine serum albumin. And many people said, why that? It's a simple model molecule. So you learn about it and then you can apply it to other molecules. Molecular weight is less than 20,000. So something that is very important about those systems is the isoelectric point. it makes a huge difference to what you're trying to do. The highest the isoelectric point, the more difficult they are to formulate. But suffice it to say, if you follow the recent literature, you will see we have been able recently to recognize a multitude of proteins and recognize them with high specificity. And those include lysozymes of albumin, also cytochrome C, and more recently, antibodies. Just one little diagram to see the final particles. These are macroparticles, they are not nanoparticles, but these are taken together and sintered in order to form the three-dimensional tissue that we want. This particular case is with alginates. So we have a wonderful patent with Edgar Perez Herrero, who is at the University of La Laguna in Tenerife Island, in Canary Islands, and I'm pretty sure they are listening right now, with which we have been able to create three-dimensional alginates that can make that recognition. Here I'll show you some results, how different proteins can be recognized by these alginates. But that's not my goal. We are coming towards the end of my scientific remarks. My other goal was to show you what we do with Amir Zadpour, who is, of course, at Leiden. And basically, we had this common student, Tinke de Vite, who works right now for Janssen, so Johnson & Johnson. And Tinke came and worked with us, and we said, there are bone tissue engineering scaffolds that we need to improve them. We need to make them much more intelligent. We need to do it in a way so that they can start releasing BMPs at certain times. All the present systems that have been reported, they are gels or polymers, they are porous, the porosity is very high, and what they do usually release is they give you something like that. That's not satisfactory. We go and we talk to the experts in the field and they say, no, you have to have an initial non-release followed by release for 4 hours and so on. And we started looking at different techniques. And here came the ingenuity of the two groups, especially Tinke de Vite. She's originally Belgian. She got her degree in the Netherlands, but she did all the work with me here. The idea is this. I was in my yard one day, about 5 years ago, and we have lots of flowers. And I saw a flower that we call in Greek pyracanthus, pyracanth. And pyracanth in the spring had these little red berries, little red things that last for 2 or 3 weeks, and the rest was green. And I said, that's the idea. I'm going to create a two-network system where the external network will be something pliable, easy. Actually, I started with chitosan. And eventually it can even degrade. It will have very open structure. And then I put inside the microberries, nanoberries. And these are the red dots that in them are very cross-linked, and in them have the morphogenic protein or whatever else you want. And we filed for patents and we got the patents and so on. And there are companies interested. And as you can imagine now, it's a big process. We have several students working, but it all started from that work. And just to show you, the 3% chitosan by itself has some openings that will allow us to put the dots, the little particles, if you wish. The moduli remain relatively strong. That's very nice because these are systems that you may have to have there for 5-10 hours before you start releasing. And so here are 3 different systems. Obviously, system 3, the scaffold with the bow nanoparticles, is the one that works the best. And here comes now the serendipity and the gâteau. in French, the present, that these systems can be 3D printed. So suddenly you have a system where after some pre-polymerization, you can do a 3D printing, and you have all the recognitive characteristics that we said before. So I'm coming towards the end. Here you can see some results that we have done with confocal microscopy to see where the scaffold goes, the nanoparticles, and the combined overlay. And we are now able to create scaffolds that are intelligent, recognize the surrounding environment, and at the same time, they release as we want them to release, very early, in the middle, or late. And you know what? Because of the way we have made them, they are also biodegrading. So you will allow me to go a little bit fast and come to, this was what I want to show, the replacement of the broken bone. And it hasn't been done in the hospital yet, but we have all the parts of it to be able to recreate the tissue. So I'm closing with the longest part of the work by saying we are very excited in my laboratory. We have still a large group. God has blessed me. As you know, I'm of a certain age. Bob Langer and I, we are exactly the same age by 4 days. We both have big laboratories, but how can't you do it when you have great students like this? And I want you to look at this picture. It's important that you look at this picture. It is a representative of the whole world. There are people there who they or their parents came from India, Bangladesh, and China, Singapore, Colombia, San Salvador, Angola, Nigeria. So everywhere in the world. I've been a professor for 47 years. I will probably retire when I am an independent professor 50 years. So in 4 years' time, 2026. And maybe Alice can have a special icons party for that. But there are some comments that I have to make. The field has changed. How do you teach these people engineering? How do you teach these people science? What do? They have so many problems to address. For one thing, life is getting very expensive. I don't know how it is in your countries. I happen to know it's very expensive in Greece and in Europe, very expensive in the United States. Recently, we had to raise the salary for graduate students to $36,000. There was no way with 28 to do anything. And the other thing is that we have, for the best students, we have an additional extra something. But they are lost. They're in the middle of COVID. My answer is very simple. You are a professor because you want to be an educator. If you came to start a company with 3 postdocs and 2 graduate students, excuse me, this is the wrong place for you to be. You have a calling. The calling is to educate the young generation. So when I'm asked, how many of these 1,600 papers are your best ones, and when are you proud? I'm the proudest for the graduate students and the undergraduates. And that's why you heard it today. I was talking to you about Tony Mikos and Christy Anseth and so on. I was not talking about this part. I talked about one patent, okay? You have to be a mentor. As long as your university allows it, be a mentor. Bring them to the office. I speak with each and every one of my students for half an hour a week. Everybody. The only thing we are not allowed to do as much is if they start telling you personal things, like I broke up with my boyfriend or something. That please go to the dean of students to say that. But otherwise, you're there, give them advice. They don't know. The world is changing. Suddenly we need 4 years for a postdoc. No, you need 4 years for a postdoc if you want to go to certain universities. But there are other universities, like, for example, the University of, I will not say, other universities, where with 1 year postdoc, they would love you as long as you care for the students. Be a leader in research. Come up with something new. Be a good decision maker. Not maker, maker. Basically, where you feel very comfortable, give a solution. Be courteous. You started bad the day, don't go to the office or lock the door. Don't go to the office and then say, oh, what are you doing? You don't understand. Never use the words, you're stupid. Nobody's stupid. Okay, some of the best solutions in my life came because of stupid questions, quote unquote. Be impartial. You're Greek. That doesn't mean you have to support all the other Greeks and nobody else. Okay. In fact, many people know that I've had 1,045 students in my laboratory. Only one Greek, Tony Mikos. Be supportive of everyone. And then I want to close. Promote diversity. Bring women in the environment, recognize them, give them all the tools that you have given to anybody else. I am very proud that out of the 115 PhDs, 19 PhDs I have graduated, 54 are women. My first PhD was a woman, and she's still active at the age of whatever. And promote inclusivity, okay? Don't say things like, oh, I cannot hire you because, I apologize, because you're Turk. Actually, I've had 3 PhDs who are from Turkey. All 3 of them are in the United, 2 of them are in the United States. So a professor for me has to be a true educator, a good listener, a problem solver. Please don't become a professor and then after 7 years, become associate dean of this and associate dean of that. And if you want to be, that's fine, but use 3 days of the week to see your students, to supervise. Also, you know what else I hate? And it happens in the United States. You have young assistant professors. What would you like as a startup fund? I would like to have 2 PhDs, 2 postdocs, and a lab manager. Excuse me? What the heck is this lab manager? Why do you need a lab manager? Why don't you go into the laboratory? Ladies and gentlemen, you come from different countries, and I'm from another country. How can I go to the taxpayers of Texas and say, pay my salary and give me the equipment because I don't want to do work? I need to have a lab manager to order the equipment. Do you know how many people I have that you ask them, did you do these protein studies? Yes, we did. Very nice results. What technique did you use? I don't remember. I have to ask my students. Come on. So they ask the students. They come back and they say, oh, we use UV light, 272 nanometers. And you smile. And you say, you are the famous professor that has done the studies with 272 nanometer UV light. All proteins have 272 nanometers. Which ELISA did you use? So be a good decision maker, provide solutions, provide special accommodation for people. Please don't shy away if you see somebody that needs something special, needs more time. Not all of us are fast. Some of us take some time. Provide equal opportunity for all. So as we celebrate Teachers' Day tomorrow, I'm saying this is a sacred profession. It's not a profession. It's a mission. And I have said it in public, in Twitter. And there were people that came to me and said, yes, do you want us to work after hours? and not be paid. Yes, I want you to work after hours and not be paid. Because if you don't like that, go to industry, go somewhere at home and watch your television and be happy. But as long as you are a professor and as long as you are a mentor, continue doing that. The life of the young kids depends on you. The life of your country depends on you. Like Maria, of course, I am originally from Greece, and I cry every day. I see this hemorrhage, this bleeding. You know, many Greeks, they finish their PhD or their master's or their bachelor's, and they go to England, and then they stay in England. Okay? Some of them come to the United States. Why? Return, help the person. Oh, but the salary is not going to be the same. Oh, there is going to be hierarchy. Change it. For me, there is no hierarchy. I talk with you the same way I talk to Bob Langer and everybody else. So as I close, I want to thank Alice. She will take over now and ask for all kinds of comments and questions. Okay, one final comment I want to make. I really want to make that, especially because in the last 20 years, there has been so much change. Please support scholarly work. Stop running after translational work all the time. Of course, translation is important. Why would the government of your state pay your salary if you don't give them something back? But at the same time, realize scholarly work has to stay. And you know what I hate the most about young professors? Not in my departments, thank God. What I hate is they say, oh, I'm going to have 2 students, a laboratory manager, and I will get 2 patents and I will start 2 startup companies. This is crazy. Do that in a company. Don't do it here. But the students learn. No, the students don't learn. You use the students as slaves. I apologize for the expression. You use them as slaves to achieve your goals of having translational work. And very often that translational work is promising, but it never comes to a final product. So all of us who work with the medical school, and of course I work with pediatrics and surgery, talk to the medical doctors. And as my dean of medicine has told me, Nicholas, don't be a smart aleck. Don't come to us to tell us what is needed. Come to us and listen to what problems we have, and then let's help them together. So I'll stop here. Alice, this is the end of my talk. Thank you very much. And let me stop sharing. And now I'm going to.
Thank you, Professor Nicholas Peppers. I'm so proud of your talk. And it is great, as you say, that to be a teacher is not a job, it's a mission. I totally can feel, your passion here and can feel, your love of the, science and love of these education jobs. So proud of you. So I'm really, really, feel glad and feel honored, to have you here to celebrate this special event for Teachers Day. Let me now introduce our panelists to get on the stage, and then we can have the panel discussions. And our first, panelist is Professor Xi Peng. Yeah, he is here. Peng. Yeah. Actually, Xi Peng has delivered his ICANX tax, I think it's this year or last year. So yeah, last year. But he did a lot of nice works for the super high, resolution, this imaging work. So he will introduce that later. And I think Peng here today will have a lot of thought about to be a good teacher. Yeah. Okay. We have Professor Honggang Cui as our panelist. Honggang has been our panelist, months ago. I think, that time we invited one professor from Johns Hopkins, and Professor Honggang was joined the panel, did very wonderful work. And Honggang also a very famous professor in this field for the tissue engineer. Honggang, welcome. And we have Maria Jason Colado. So, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, Maria, I try my best to get the pronunciation of your surname, of your last name. Yeah, so, okay. Yeah, Professor Maria is one of the most famous professor in Greece. He is now working in the University of Crete, and is also very active in the international society. And he just now you hear about Professor Nicholas say that he joined the big debate. I think today we have a Maria here as well to hear some very nice suggestions and comments about all these things. And also this is people from Professor Nicholas Peppas' hometown, right? Yeah, the home country. Yeah, there will be a good connections. Welcome, Maria. And we have our challenger today is Bin Bin Ying. Bin Bin was got PhD from Canada, and he's got now is doing PhD in MIT. Bin Bin actually is very active in the Young Society, even be a co-founder of one Young Scientist Society. Bin Bin, welcome. Now let's get everyone on the stage. Got my chair here. So today, yeah, you see that we have more fun. So, Bibi, are you ready for your question? Yeah, please.
Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you, Professor Zhang, for the wonderful platform, and thank you, Professor Peppers, for your nice sharing. I'm really enjoying your talk and your personal story regarding behind your research, and also I'm very happy to be on the panelist with Professor Honggang Cui, Professor Maria, and Professor Xi here today. So it's a wonderful platform for me. So for me, like I today my role is that I can ask challenger. So I'd like to begin the question. My curiosity actually is like today's topic is Teachers' Day, like next generation education. So my so I think like it's very good. I mean, this today is a very good time for like to raise this question. Like as a young research like my age, we sometimes feel this kind today's education system or a research environment is totally different from like 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and some of us even feel today's education system or research system is a little bit toxic or like full of involution than 20 years ago. So young research like me or other postdoc or PhD student or even like young assistant professor are sometimes suffering mental health or anxiety because like, you know, our salary is low, right? Low income, the high living cost. And we found it's very challenging to find a dream job in academia world or even like in industry. So I think it's quite important for us, like and also for like for everybody to take action to protect the young scholar, because young scholar is very vital or very key to the next generation young scholars education. So I think for me, I'd like to hear more about comment or advice from senior scholar, like what we can do to change or like to do something to protect the young scholar like my age. Then we can have a brighter next generation education system in the future. So Professor Peppers, can you comment on that?
Yeah, Professor.
This is a very, very, very good question, Bing. And I want to say simply, many of us, I cannot say all of us, but many of us are protecting our students. We teach them. We are there next to them. We answer questions. I know, for example, I don't want to be self-serving. I will answer questions at midnight. If the student sends me a text message, I will answer at midnight. Okay, Bob Langer, you all know it's famous. If you say I have a problem, he will call you back within 5 minutes. So that's number one. Number two, we are all cognizant of the fact that some professors used to take the ideas of the students and file patents themselves without the students. That has changed. That has to change. If the student had the idea, participated actively, was an inventor, has to be recognized. And Maria, I don't know if that's happening in Greece. I hope it's happening everywhere. There were a few European countries, not necessarily Greece, where there was a hierarchy. Only the professor would get the patent. These are changing, okay? Concerning the finances, look, we are in a difficult time. Things have changed. But when I came to the United States 51 years ago, do you really think I had a lot of money? It was $285. I did not have a car until I became an assistant professor. And our excitement was that we would go every Saturday to Central Square in MIT, you know, where there was an Italian restaurant where you could have macaroni and meatballs, spaghetti and meatballs, all you can eat for $3. Why are we complaining now? Why is it right now? Oh, and I have to go on vacation. The beginning is always difficult, okay? And eventually you will succeed. Get some basic salary. But you're absolutely right. We have to protect the intellectual property and the ideas of the students. And that's why more and more universities, they have now norms. And they say, if you work in the laboratory, everything you do goes to, you know, consider for patents or for new technology or for new companies and so on. I don't know if the others have some comment about it.
Yeah, yes, sure. So first, I would like to thank Professor Peppas for this exciting, very inspiring talk, talking to us about so many aspects of our job, which is a profession. We need to do research, and that's why we're there. But also, we need to educate to the younger generation of students. And being caring, I mean, to care for them, to solve problems, to help them and support them in any way they need, and be there for them. So it was really fantastic, and I share all these great opinions. And I mean, also from my side at our University of Crete, we do this. We are in the material science department. We are quite a young department, since 20 years, and we have a very personal relationship to the students. We know them with name. Of course, we have consulting groups, and they come to us and tell us their problems. Also, the undergraduate students, of course, the master students and the PhD students as well. It is really great, and I'm very happy that I hear all these nice aspects, and I agree with them. But maybe I can make a comment if there is time to the scientific part, because I'm really very much passionate and working in the area of bone tissue engineering. And there, I agree with Professor Peppas. It is really great, and it's fantastic to study the interactions of single molecules, to know which are the properties of the monomers and then of the polymers. And then for me, as a tissue engineering researcher, I have to put these systems, the three-dimensional scaffold, in interaction with cells. And then we know that the cells secrete other molecules, proteins, growth factors. So the system becomes more complex and more complicated. And then the question is, how do we control all these parameters? Because if we have only one system, a monomer, polymer, a three-dimensional structure, of course, we have to control several parameters, I agree. Once we add more proteins and growth factors in a multifunctional system, and then cells, millions of cells, things become much more complicated because each component contributes to the degradation rate as well of the organism. So this is amazing. I mean, this we are very much interested in investigating also these issues after adding biological components to the scaffolds. So maybe
Maria, I am delighted to hear your comment. Obviously, in an hour and a quarter, I cannot give all our work, but I have actually a big meeting to which I'm giving a lot of the work in Porto in 4 weeks in Portugal. But basically, you're right. What I presented today is in a rather idealistic system where there is water, the polymer, and perhaps a cell or tissue. But in reality, there will be so many other components that will be present. So we, like you and like others, we are working also with specific applications. And that's how it has to go. But I'm stressing at the beginning, start with something that is functioning, and then see how it's used in the actual application with the organ next to it, the cells next to it. Honggang, you agree with that?
Yes. So if I can comment a little bit on, Bimin's, question on the junior faculty. One thing I want to say that, if you are hired by department, which means that your senior colleagues are supportive of you, right? So you are the one, if you see problem, you need to reach out. Sometimes nobody knows your problem. If you do not reach out, people do not know the problem, they don't know how to help you, right? If you need help, just do not be shy, just reach out. I think they will help you. But that's the only thing I can say about that. Professor Pepper, I do have a question, for you. Top of the role of university, right? Back in 1970s, when you were in college or in grad school, university were regarded as ivory tower, right? So it's a place for learning, for learning new knowledge, for inspiration, right? Students, came to university, may not think much about what happened afterwards, right? Just want to learn new knowledge. But these days, university pretty much become a training center, right? The students see them as the step stone for their next step of their career. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe that's the role university plays these days. So sometimes, for us as mentors or professors, we do not want, train students who cannot find a job, even they are well-polished students, very good, but they cannot find jobs. But at the same time, we are facing, challenges, right? Students take a class from you. They want to get an A. They may not care about how much they learn from a class. They want to get an A, right? So the pre-med students, how do we cope, challenges, like that? How we tell them, hey, there's something on do something, you still have to pay attention to the new knowledge and learning. How do we cope with the ever-changing, situation like this for university?
Really the most difficult question, and so difficult to answer because we have so many countries and we represent the whole world. And there are countries where the governments themselves say, you are going to do translational work. We don't need anything else. And you know why they say it? For the reason I told you earlier. Why would the taxpayers of Greece or Portugal or Italy pay for us to have 3 more high impact factor papers? You must be kidding me. And they work. So your question is very, very important. Yes, when I started, everything was academic. We were working for the common good, supposedly. Don't forget, these were the ends after 1969, where Neil Armstrong went to the moon. We were all excited. Everything was becoming computerized and so on. When Bob Langer came in and said, yeah, I will publish, but I want to do patents, that was a big surprise. That was 1976, 77. We couldn't understand what he was saying. He was affected by Judah Folkman. I think a balance of the two things is probably more appropriate. So what I say to the new generation is, you want to do the translational work, find something to do because you want to help people. It's a particular disease that has not been studied very much. What I don't want is you're saying I do it so that I can get rich myself. That's wrong for me. That's wrong for me. Okay. I can assure you, and you've heard it many times, when Cato Lorenzen or Bob Langer or Tony Mikos started doing their work, they were not thinking of the companies they made. They were not thinking of how much money they were going to come up. Okay. When I see Professor Zhang at Sichuan University, or Fu at the PLA, or Professor Cao at Nankai University, now he's the president, I've never heard of them saying, and you know, I want to get money. Now, of course, the training system is different, but still, I don't. It's really the excitement that you solve a problem that will help people. I was in a hospital in Chongqing University, a huge facility for trauma, for burn trauma. My God, the most incredible cases you could imagine. And all these doctors were dedicated to that, how they could solve those problems. So, Honggang, you're right. There is a dichotomy and there are people pulling it. And we have, unfortunately, not at UT, hopefully, but very poor administrators who say, oh, and we have 3 new companies. I mean, you said yesterday you saw the announcement from the National Academy of Inventors, and this is the number 1, number 2, number 3 company in patents this year. Okay, so you are another, I don't know, IBM or Google and so on. My comment, and Alice, I'm saying it to the people that are in the audience, my comment is, let's educate the new generation. And if we don't educate them, we will suffer in other ways. We will suffer politically when that next generation that is not educated will come in and say, what, Professor Hatzinikolaidou, you don't know anything. I know everything. You don't have to go to the university. You go out. Okay, don't we hear that already? We don't need a degree. And there are people that are, they don't need a degree. Okay.
Professor Nicholas, I'm so glad you say that. Actually, why we try so hard, to keep all these kind of science talks online to get all the people together. Exactly, that's what I'm thinking. I try to get all the people, the generations, know that they must get educated. They must know what's the real contribution, in this world to make our living better. So that's a science and technology. That's education. So that's what we are doing here. So actually, we have a lot of people here try to ask you questions. I think Peng, yeah, please.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Peppas, for your wonderful talk, and it's very inspiring. And also, Binbin's question is very unique. It brings me some thoughts that the mission of teaching, since today is the teacher, tomorrow is the teacher's day. So the mission of teaching is we need to have love, care, and patience to the students and the young generation, the junior faculties. So about Binbin's question, I think I can give my 2 cents, which is you probably can think of find an senior mentor in your own department or in your own college. then you will have some feedback and the support because he is going through all this career path and he know where is the valley and what you need to do because Professor Peppers just mentioned that since you mentioned about the low salary, etc., if you are concentrating on your own income and you want to make money, you are quite often being attracted to something that is less important than you get tenured. So you need to focus on really the big problems. And so here in China, our situation is that in our College of Future Technology, we give the junior faculty 1 year. You don't need to teach, and you can focus on your research. And we give them each year 2 PhD students so that they can quickly build up their team. And then in our nationwide, we have recently released some government funds that are specifically for young scientists. So that's some strong support to the young generation. And I'm also thinking that nowadays we have so many companies provides all kinds of products much more than we can consume. And in the meantime, we have so many, we as humans also produced massively those weapons that can destroy this beautiful planet many, many times. And although, in terms of the goods we have, our resources are so rich in this generation. Yet, in terms of the mental health, the inner self, we are really very, very stressful. It's really a very very in contrast world blended into this mixture, and the only solution is once again love, care, and patience. I think we can only change the microenvironment of ourselves. So those students, faculties, our friends, our families, those people are surrounding us. But if we give them our love, care, and patience, I believe this world will be better and better.
Okay, great. Yeah, Peng says that exactly right words. So we have people here. Any questions from our audience? Yeah, Meng, please.
Uh, Thank you, Professor Peppers. Thank you for your wonderful lecture. And I have a question, because I am Meng. I'm assistant professor in Peking University, and I'm teaching Jewish civilization, German literature, and Yiddish language and Jewish culture. So I'm in totally a very, very different area as you. And I was very amazed as Alice told me that you have nursed already 1,200 students. And I'm always wondering, how did you manage to strike the balance between teaching and the research? And especially since we are in very different areas, I'm just wondering, like in your areas, you have students in your lab, and the students' research is closely linked to your own research. But in my case, as I'm teaching in human arts, so the students' research is not necessarily linked with my research. So my teaching is more totally pure dedication to the students. And as other professors know, that young assistant professors actually have a lot of pressure on research. So I'm hoping that I can get your suggestions and advice on how I can strike that balance between teaching and research. And I'm very, very moved, as you mentioned, that if at midnight you got a question from your students, you will answer immediately. This is really something that touched me. And thank you very much for your sharing.
I thank you so much for this question. This is really the reason why we're here. What you don't know is that I know Hebrew and that I studied at the Hillel Club of MIT. Also, what you don't know is that these books that you see behind me, if Alice allows us to show my office at home, they are all books on opera and classical music and foreign languages. So I have another life. And so I understand your concern, where research is not the same way research is done in the biomedical field. But I think you gave the answer already. You're close to the students. You take something from the Jewish literature and you spend a lot of time to show the pleasure and the sage advice that these people had and the pleasure that they give to the modern world. And you make them excited about that. And that brings us to the question of Professor Shipeng and also Bing Yang. Not everything is money. Not everything is money. You can make 2,000 euros a month in Europe and be the happiest of people and be next to your book. You cannot imagine how many hours and how much pleasure I get from listening to all these classical records. And Alice knows that I'm writing books in musicology and discography and so on. And what I didn't tell you is that at midnight I will get questions about Dr. Peppas. This singer, did he sing in the Scala in July of 1976 or not? And I go and I check in my books, and yes, he sang in the Scala. Do you have any recordings? And yes, I have the recordings. So what I'm saying is, there is another world that is equally good, perhaps even better, that sets you free, brings you back to the past, but teaches you things for the future. So the questions that you had are questions that we have. Not all the time do we talk about biomedical and chemical and I don't know what else. And we try to have a balance and give our students an excitement. And I have supervised a few students in those areas because sometimes I spend the summers doing historical work. So thank you. It's a wonderful comment and persevere. So perseverance that you are with your student, you teach them something different that they like and continue teaching that.
Yeah, Maurice did a great job. Yeah. So the lots of questions in here. Anyone? Yeah. So anyone from the audience? Yep. Please.
I have a question.
Okay,
actually.
one more.
So, Professor Peppers, when you mentioned about when you were in Purdue University in the West Lafayette, middle of nowhere, I suddenly feel very
I didn't
close
say
to
that.
you.
I didn't say it.
Okay, that was automatically called from my memory.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I can see.
So yeah, because I did my second postdoc there in the Purdue University cytometry lab. Yes, and my supervisor is Professor Paul Robinson, who is the
Of course, Paul Robinson is a very good friend. And as you know, he went all the way to Everest.
great.
You know?
It's a small world, yeah. And yeah, he taught me a lot, and he really inspired me to be a good teacher. So my question is, since you mentioned about it's actually both to you and to Maria. So you mentioned that Maria just attended a debate in Europe where people say that you can't 3D print an entire organ in 10 years. But you have demonstrated a lot of hydrogel technology that seems to be very promising to this approach. So I was curious whether you think that's the first kick, the first force, the first driving force is not there, or it's a technical issue, meaning we cannot support the survival of this organ even when it's when we can print it instantly. It just doesn't stay. Yeah,
Shipeng, my answer is very simple. Maria is much more of an expert than I am, but the thing is, I believe that someday, not in 10 years, but someday we will have the ability to print a new organ. Maybe 50 years from now, 40 years from now. The problems you said will always exist and there will be some solutions. Can I make a small comment? When I arrived in the United States on July 31st, 1971, I was asked to develop a new non-thrombogenic biomaterial for artificial hearts. 51 years later, we don't have a heart. We have an assist device, but not an artificial heart. You know why? Because the blood still clots on those stupid surfaces, no matter what we put in there. So what I'm saying is, 50 years from now, where I will be just simply powder somewhere in the earth, there will be still people saying someday we will make it. But we are all making efforts. I don't know, Maria, did you say something different? I was not in your talk, actually.
Yeah, we want to hear a debate.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to comment a little bit on this debate of the ESB 22 in Bordeaux in France. It was really fantastic. It was very vibrant. So the question was, this house believes that in a decade from now, we will have functional bioprinted organs or tissues or organs. So one of the key words in this question was functional, and functionality is the big issue and challenge, as Professor Peppas just commented on the blood and heart. And of course, we have a high complexity and also hierarchy in many of the tissues of the human organs. And it is not easy to make a functional organ, particularly because many of them are with vessels, they have a vasculature, and some of them have also nerves. So vascularization, innervation are two other challenging questions to work on, except of the primary tissue. For example, if you have a heart or heart valve or a bone, you also need to do the other. Even in so-called simple organs, such as the skin, things are not very easy to reproduce in a functional way. Of course, we can 3D print tissues, and we have a very successful in vitro and in vivo results from the cellular responses from the in vivo studies. But we have still to work on, we are not there to bioprint functional organs. There are reviews, we know there is a liver already done, but it survived for 3D bioprinted liver, but it was living for only 5 days. So we need better solutions for longer time. Thank you.
Really super to hear your voice about this, because I have a lecture is about from Alice to Alita. Yeah, I think in the future we should have someone like a hybrid. Yeah, to get all these function together, get all these organs together, to make something new, to make maybe even new pieces. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a dream. Okay, we like this kind of discussions. Thank you, all of you, and thank you very much for the great discussions. And to be a great teacher, actually, Professor Nicholas, yeah, I like to deliver the. Sorry, why? Yeah, next page, please.
The certificate. Eh?
Yeah, certification. Yeah, so I don't know why I couldn't come out. Yeah, Professor Nicholas. Yeah, that's our honor to deliver this certification to you. We're so proud to have you today. So yeah, that's all for you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
that's not the end of today, Professor Nicholas. Yeah.
Yes.
So we have another certification. Is for the best teachers of the world. To Professor Nicholas. Yeah. Also, come on. Yeah. So, Professor Nicholas, can you see this?
Oh yes, that's my cake. Eh?
Did you see the numbers on the top? It's
Oh.
your students. Yeah. So
That's
Professor
great.
Nicholas has 1,200 students from his lab. We're so proud of that, you know, the best teachers. And did you see the small one? The tech is the best teachers, Professor Nicholas. So thank you. Congratulations. Yeah.
You are incredible.
Okay, great. Yeah. Professor Nicholas, we're so happy to have you. Yeah. We're proud of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
We think now
exceptionally
today,
proud.
a lot of people hear your voice is to be a teacher is not a job. It's a mission. It's a mission. Yeah. So everyone, please try your best, like Professor Nicholas. Yeah. We also have this one for you.
Oh my gosh.
The flowers.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah,
Wait
you
a minute,
see that.
Alice, show me the flowers this way.
Okay, see here.
Oh, okay.
I think
Very
all this,
good, very
yeah,
good.
the lily is the most for, you know, yeah, very, very great love
I
and
know,
honors.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Thank
so
you so much. You're very kind.
we love
Congratulations.
you. Yeah, I hope you know that. Yeah, even we are not peppers. Yeah, but we love you. Yeah,
You
we
know
really,
everything.
yeah, we love you very much. Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank
Yeah,
you all.
okay.
Bye.
So next week we're going to have a winner, the young scientist, the world winner of 2021. So we have two speakers. Was one from University of Washington and Seattle. Another one is from Hanyang University and Korean. So this was a winner of last year. So we are right in the corner. We're calling for the nominations of this year for the young scientist. So the young scientist who got the committee is pretty large and diverse from whole of the world. I think from Professor Nicholas, the talks, you know that why we try to have this young scientist award is because we try to promote, help, and protect all these young generations. So like Bin Bin, don't worry about it. Yeah, we have a very good design for you. So please jump in and submit your materials. And if you get your PhD within 10 years, so you're qualified to submit your materials for this Young Scientist Award. So just to get one PDF package for UCV and everything, and two recommendation letters, you know, to info@icanx.com. Yeah, so the deadline for this is September, 18. It's about less than 10 days. So please prepare, and we will select all the materials, and we'll get you the chance to celebrate on ICANX. So this was a deadline, so that's 9 days to go. So you have enough time to prepare. And all this young science, please do join us on ICANX. This is a team, professionally to help you, to protect you, and to promote you. So this is a place for everyone on this world to be science and to love science, because science connects the world and the universe. So enjoy the talks, and we see you next Friday. Bye-bye.
不再是奇迹，不再是幻想，此刻真感觉全世界为我鼓掌，不必太在意身旁惊奇的目光，可以点点头，可以放声歌唱。